The worst moment of my life had a camera pointed at my face. My father was holding a champagne glass, my mother was smiling. And in front of half the town, under warm string lights and a giant banner that said Bennett Family Scholarship Night, my father tapped his fork against a glass, looked straight into the lens and said, "Every family has one child who carries the name forward and one who teaches you what disappointment looks like." People laughed, not because it was funny, because they thought it was a joke. Then my mother leaned closer to the microphone and said, "We've prayed for Mara for years. Some kids are blessings. Some are lessons." That's when the room went quiet, because they realized they meant it, and the camera was still rolling. I wish I could say I stood up for myself right there. I wish I could say I grabbed the mic and exposed everything. But humiliation doesn't make you brave. It makes you cold first. It makes you feel like your bones are trying to leave your body. So I just stood there with my hands locked at my sides while people looked at me with that same small town expression I'd seen my whole life. Pity, curiosity, relief that it wasn't happening to them. My little brother Luke was sitting 2 tables away in a navy suit, looking like the son my parents had always wanted. Successful, polished, safe, the golden child. He didn't defend me. He looked down at his plate, and somehow that hurt even more. By midnight, the clip was everywhere. Town Facebook groups, group chats, local gossip pages. Someone even added soft piano music behind it, like my humiliation needed a soundtrack. By morning, I was no longer just the family disappointment. I was the entertainment. That should have been the first time they broke me. But it wasn't. People in town thought I was the one who wasted every opportunity. That I was lazy, that I was difficult. That I'd been given everything and ruined it. That story had been fed to them for years, one careful lie at a time. My parents were experts at that. They didn't scream in public. They didn't throw things. They built narratives. My father, Richard Bennett, owned the town's biggest hardware and supply business. My mother ran fundraisers, church dinners, school drives, and every smiling charity photo within 20 miles. Together, they were the kind of couple people called good people without thinking too hard. And me? I was the daughter who never figured life out. That was the story. What nobody knew was that I had been working since I was 16. Not because I wanted spending money. Because my family needed saving and nobody ever said it out loud. When my mother wanted to host events she couldn't afford, I was the one who stayed up making budgets. When my grandmother Hazel got sick, I was the one who bathed her, fed her, changed her sheets, and sat beside her at 3 a.m. when she forgot what year it was and asked if the house was still hers. Luke didn't do any of that. Luke had football practice. Luke had college tours. Luke had so much potential. I had responsibility. I had silence. Out of state. Partial scholarship. I still remember holding the envelope in the kitchen, shaking so hard I almost tore it open wrong. I thought maybe that would be my way out. I thought maybe for once my life would begin somewhere my last name didn't already own the air. My mother cried when I told her. Not happy tears. Weapon tears. She said leaving would kill my grandmother. My father said the business needed me temporarily. Luke had just gotten into a prep program, and money was tight, and family came first, and mature daughters understood these things. They made selfishness sound like betrayal. So I stayed. Temporarily became years. The scholarship expired. Nobody in town heard about the letter. They only heard what my parents told them. Mara changed her mind. Mara wasn't ready. Mara has a habit of quitting. That last one was almost funny. Because I had never been allowed to quit anything. Not pain. Not work. Not them. When Grandma Hazel got worse, she started saying strange things. Some days she thought I was my mother. Some days she forgot Luke entirely. But on her clear days, she would grip my hands so tightly at her and whisper, "Don't let them bury you under their version." At the time, I thought it was the illness talking. I know better now. The camera night wasn't random. That was the part nobody understood. My parents didn't humiliate me because they snapped. They humiliated me because they needed something. People like them never destroy a person without a reason. That scholarship event was supposed to celebrate Luke coming home to join the family business after his finance job in the city fell apart. But of course, the town didn't hear it that way. They heard he had chosen family values over corporate greed. That's how my mother phrased it online. Donors had started asking questions about scholarship money. And I'd spent the last 3 months noticing numbers that didn't make sense. Transfers, missing receipts, checks copied twice. A small nonprofit account linked to my mother's events that was suddenly bleeding money. When I asked my father about it, his face changed. Not guilty, worried. Which is worse. 2 days before the event, he came into the back office and asked for my laptop password. He smiled when he asked. I knew that smile. It meant danger dressed like politeness. I told him I handle the books myself. He stood there for a second too long, then nodded like I passed some invisible test. That night, my mother asked me to wear blue to the dinner because it looked softer on camera. I didn't understand that sentence until it was too late. They knew exactly what they were doing. They wanted me framed a certain way, quiet, unstable, embarrassed. The kind of woman people don't ask follow-up questions about. After the video spread, I lost more than dignity. By noon the next day, my father sent me a message telling me not to come back to the store until I had worked through some things. As if I had been the one who turned public cruelty into family content, my key code stopped working. My email access was gone. Even the payroll app locked me out. Then my mother posted a Bible verse about rebellious children and private pain, the comments filled with sympathy. For her, I spent that afternoon sitting in my car behind Miller's Diner, watching people go in and out while my phone kept lighting up. Some messages were fake kind. You know, your parents love you. Maybe take this as a wake-up call. Others were worse because they were honest. Honestly, your mom always tried so hard with you. I turned the phone face down and cried so hard I couldn't breathe. Not neat crying, not movie crying. The kind that makes you ugly and furious. The kind that drags every old wound into the room with it. I cried for the scholarship letter. For every birthday that somehow became Luke's celebration too. For every church lady who told me to be grateful for such generous parents. For every night I slept in a chair beside Grandma while my mother posted photos about family devotion like love was a costume she rented. And mostly I cried because some part of me still wanted them to come find me, to say it was enough, to say they were sorry to choose me once. They didn't. Instead, at 6:43 that evening, Luke called. I almost didn't answer. His voice sounded wrecked. Mara, he said, whatever you do, don't go home. That made me sit up. Why? He went quiet. Then he said, Dad's saying money is missing. He's telling people you had access to everything. For a second, I couldn't speak. I had expected cruelty. I had expected more lies. But framing me for theft while the town was already laughing? That was a different level. That's insane, I whispered. I know, he said, and something in his voice cracked. Just don't go there, please. Then he hung up. No explanation, no apology. Just fear. I sat frozen until a knock on my car window nearly made me jump out of my skin. It was Nora Hawley. She had been the local paper's best reporter before the paper got bought, gutted, and turned into a glorified ad sheet. People stopped fearing her when they stopped seeing her byline. That was their mistake. Nora didn't stop watching. She just got quieter and I rolled the window down halfway. She looked at me for a long second and said, If you've got 10 minutes, I can give you a reason not to fall apart yet. I should have said no. I looked like hell. I didn't trust anyone. But there was something in her face that didn't feel hungry, didn't feel entertained. So I followed her into the diner. We took a booth in the back. She ordered coffee for both of us without asking. Then she slid a small silver flash drive across the table. I stared at it. What is that? Her eyes didn't leave mine. Insurance, she said. From who? She leaned back. From your grandmother? I laughed once. A broken sound. My grandmother died 6 months ago. Nora nodded. And 3 weeks before she died, she asked me to hold this until your parents turned the town against you. The air left my lungs. I think part of me knew right then that my life had been built on a lie far bigger than public humiliation. Why would she say that? I asked. Nora's face went hard. Because she knew exactly who they were. I didn't touch the drive. I couldn't. It felt too small to carry anything that dangerous. Nora reached into her bag again and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was my college acceptance letter. The original. The one I thought had gotten lost years ago. Except there was something else stapled behind it. Signed decline form. My decline form, only I had never signed it. My name was there. My handwriting wasn't. My whole body went numb. I never sent this. I know, Nora said. I looked up at her. My hands were shaking so badly the paper crackled. How do you know? She paused. Then she said the sentence that split my life clean in half. Because the flash drive also contains copies of the transfers your parents made from your college fund, the scholarship account, and your grandmother's estate. I couldn't blink, couldn't swallow, couldn't breathe. Nora lowered her voice. Mara, your parents didn't just lie about you. She pushed the drive closer. They built their whole reputation on what they stole from you. And that was the moment I realized the video was never the worst thing they'd done. It was just the first thing they did where the whole town could see them smiling. I didn't open the flash drive in the diner. Luke's panicked warning. The sound of my father calling me a disappointment while people smiled like they were watching harmless family drama. Nora drove me to her house because she said if I was alone, I'd either spiral or call them. She was right on both counts. Her living room was small and crowded with old books, legal pads, and boxes full of files from stories the town had probably begged to forget. She plugged the drive in. At first, it looked ordinary. Folders, scans, audio files, spreadsheets. Then she opened the first document. It was a bank statement from a college savings account in my name. A year after I gave up school, the balance had been emptied. Not toward tuition, not toward family medical costs. Toward a private payment labeled under a consulting company Luke had used when his first business idea crashed in the city. I stared at the amount until the numbers blurred. My future had not been sacrificed. It had been spent. The second file was worse. Scholarship donations from my mother's annual charity events had been transferred in small amounts over time into operating expenses for the Bennett business. Always just low enough not to cause attention. Always hidden under vague language. Always clean enough to fool people who trusted the family name. The third file made my stomach turn. A voice memo from my grandmother. Weak voice, slow breaths, but clear. Mara stayed when she should have left. Richard and Elaine made that girl carry what belonged to them. If anything happens to me and they try to bury her under lies, give her everything. I started crying before the audio ended. Nora didn't look away, didn't comfort me with lies. She just sat there and let the truth hurt properly. Then came the real twist. At the bottom of one folder was a set of emails between my father and the town scholarship board. One subject line froze me in place. Concern regarding Mara Bennett's conduct. My father had been preparing them. For years! Quietly telling people I was unstable, unreliable, emotional, difficult with money. He'd been planting the version of me he needed. So if the day ever came when something exploded, the town would already know which daughter to blame. That level of planning does something to you. It takes your pain and turns it into clarity. I stopped crying after that, not because I was okay. Because I was done begging reality to be softer than it was. Nora made one call. Then another. By midnight, an attorney named Daniel Cross was sitting at her dining table reviewing documents with a face that told me this was even uglier than I realized. He asked careful questions. Who had account access? Who handled payroll? Who controlled donor communications? Who was present when my grandmother discussed her estate? For the first time in my life, my memory wasn't being treated like an inconvenience. It was evidence. At 1:17 a.m., my phone lit up again. Luke, I let it ring once, twice. Then I answered. He sounded like he hadn't slept. Where are you? Safe. He exhaled. Dad filed a report. That made Daniel look up. What kind of report? I asked. Luke hesitated. He's saying you manipulated accounts and took money before you got locked out. There it was. The full betrayal, not just humiliation, not just lies. They were trying to hand me the crime and keep the sympathy. I pressed the phone harder against my ear. Did you know? I asked. He didn't answer fast enough. And sometimes silence is the confession. My chest tightened. Luke, I knew about the college fund, he said quietly. Not everything. I swear. Dad told me you didn't want school anymore and that they used the money to keep everyone afloat. I believed him. I shut my eyes. Of course he had known a piece. Golden children always know pieces. Just never enough to feel guilty until it's expensive. What about the speech? I asked. What about what they did to me on camera? His voice broke. Mom said it would make people stop asking questions. The room went still. Nora stopped writing. Daniel leaned back. I felt something old and fragile inside me finally die. Not my love for them. That had been dying for years. The hope that there had been a misunderstanding. That died right there. They humiliated me publicly to control the story before the money story got out. I almost laughed. It was so disgusting. It was almost elegant. Luke started crying. Actually crying. Not loud. Just that awful, ashamed breathing men do when they realize comfort has left the room. I'm sorry, he said. He wasn't innocent, but he wasn't built like them either. He was just raised inside a lie that made him profitable. Daniel took the phone and asked one question. Would you testify to what you just said? Luke whispered. If I have to. Daniel replied, you do. The next 48 hours are the longest of my life. Not because we didn't have proof. Because proof doesn't move faster than gossip. And in a town like ours, gossip arrives wearing certainty. My parents doubled down by morning. My mother posted a statement about private family heartbreak. My father said the business was conducting an internal audit because of deeply disappointing discoveries. A few people defended me. Most stayed careful. That's what cowards do when the powerful start slipping. They wait to see who still has teeth. Daniel filed motions. Nora contacted state investigators tied to the nonprofit funds. And I did the hardest thing I've ever done. I stayed quiet. No live stream. No crying response video. No angry comment thread. That's what my parents wanted. They needed me emotional and public. They needed me messy. Instead, I became patient. Nothing terrifies liars more than a victim who suddenly gets organized. 3 days later, the town council hosted a public breakfast honoring community leadership. My mother had helped organize it months before. Of course she had. There were cameras, local business owners, church leaders, scholarship board members, the exact kind of room they loved most. A room with memory problems. I hadn't planned to go. Then Daniel told me the state investigator wanted the first disclosure to happen where the misused scholarship funds had been publicly promoted. In other words, right in the middle of my parents' stage. So I wore black. No dramatic reason. I just wanted to stop dressing like a person hoping to be liked. When I walked in, heads turned. The room got that electric stillness people pretend not to enjoy. My mother saw me first. Her smile froze, then reset. That woman could turn panic into pearls. She actually walked over like she was greeting an honored guest. Mara, she said softly, reaching for my arm. This isn't the place. I stepped back before she could touch me. For a second, her face slipped, cold, sharp, the real one. Then the performance came back. Please, she whispered through her teeth. Don't embarrass us. I looked at her and almost admired the audacity. After everything, embarrassment was still the worst thing she could imagine. The event started. My father took the podium. He thanked donors. He praised Luke. He spoke about resilience, integrity, and family. That word again, family. He used it like a shield. Then, just as he lifted his hand to introduce my mother, 2 people entered through the side doors. One was a state investigator. The other was the scholarship board's attorney. They walked straight to the front. No drama, no raised voices. Just official faces in a folder thick enough to crush a reputation. The room shifted instantly. You could feel belief changing direction. My father stopped speaking mid-sentence. The investigator asked him to step aside. My mother tried to intervene. The board attorney told her they had evidence of fund diversion, false reporting, and misuse of donor money tied to multiple Bennett-sponsored events. The silence after that was brutal. Then Nora stood from the back row, notepad in hand, ready, waiting, because she had known something my parents never did. Once a town sees fear on the face of the people it trusted most, faith doesn't break slowly. It tears. My father looked for me then. Like this was somehow my fault. Like even now I should rescue him from the consequences of his own choices. I held his gaze and did nothing. That was the revenge. Not shouting, not begging, not rescuing people who had fed me to the crowd. Then came the second hit. Daniel walked forward and handed another sealed document to the board attorney. My grandmother's corrected estate filing. The one my parents thought had disappeared. The one naming me as majority beneficiary of the property attached to the original Bennett building and the trust connected to it. The same building my father used to build his moral little empire. Turns out Grandma Hazel knew exactly what her son and daughter-in-law were doing. And months before she died, she changed everything. She left the property, the trust control, and the written statement to me. Her exact words were read out later, but one line traveled through town faster than any gossip ever had. Mara carried this family without applause. Let her have what truth can still save. My mother looked like someone had taken the floor out from under her. My father looked old. Not sad. Old, like the years of control had finally become visible on his face. And Luke? Luke stood there like a man watching the house he grew up in burn, finally understanding he had been warmed by somebody else's fire. After the breakfast collapsed, people came toward me in waves. Some wanted details. Some wanted forgiveness. Some wanted to act like they had always suspected something. That made me sicker than the lies. Because the truth is, most of them had seen enough over the years. They just preferred comfort over courage. I didn't give speeches. I didn't give them tears. I just said, read the filings when they're public. That afternoon, Nora's story went live. Not a gossip piece, a careful demolition. Financial records, estate documents, my forged decline form, quotes from board members. A pattern of image management and quiet financial abuse. She never called my parents monsters. She didn't need to. Facts are crueler when they don't raise their voice. By sunset, the same town that once laughed at me on camera was reposting apologies and shock and outrage. People stopped saying I was dramatic. Stopped saying I was unstable. Stopped saying my parents had done their best. The spell broke. That was the title people used later, how the town stopped believing them. But that's not exactly true. A town like that never stops all at once. Some people still whispered. Some still defended my mother because she had brought casseroles when their husbands died. Some still said my father had worked hard all his life, as if hard work erases cruelty. As if public kindness cancels private theft. What really happened was simpler. My parents had built their whole power on being the most believable people in the room, and then the room saw paperwork. The room heard recordings. The room watched officials interrupt their performance. After that, belief didn't die. It got embarrassed. My mother called me that night. I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. But some endings deserve witnesses, I answered. For the first few seconds, she didn't speak. Then she said very quietly, "You've destroyed this family." I looked out at Nora's back porch, where the evening light was fading over a chipped wooden rail. I thought about every year I had bled quietly to keep their name clean. Then I said, "No, I just stopped standing where you pushed me." She inhaled sharply. There was real emotion in that silence. Not remorse. Loss, the loss of control feels like grief to people who mistake ownership for love. "After all we did for you," she said. That line, that old poison, it didn't work anymore. "You mean after all I did for you?" I replied. She hung up. My father never called. Luke did. A lot. The first few times, I ignored him. Then, one evening I answered and listened while he apologized without defending himself. That mattered, not enough to fix anything, but enough to prove he might one day become someone better than the house that made him. Weeks later, the legal process began swallowing everything. Audits, board removals, tax reviews, church whispers, old stories resurfacing. Suddenly, other people remembered strange donations, pressured signatures, favors called in, debts made invisible. That's the thing about one truth coming loose. It rarely comes alone. I moved into the apartment above the old building my grandmother left me. It needed work. Paint peeling, pipes groaning. Dust in every corner. But it was mine. Mine in a way nothing in my life had ever been. On my first night there, I sat on the floor eating takeout with a screwdriver beside me and a stack of legal papers on the counter. And for the first time in years, the silence around me didn't feel like punishment. It felt like space. A month later, I announced that the old Bennett Scholarship Fund would be dissolved and restructured under a new name. Hazel House Foundation, not for image, not for gala photos, not for family branding. For girls who had to delay their lives because somebody at home called sacrifice love. That part made people cry. I didn't. Not there, not anymore. I had cried enough in rooms where nobody deserved it. But I will tell you this. The night before the foundation launch, I found one more envelope hidden inside my grandmother's old recipe box. No label, no date. Inside was a second note in her handwriting and a key I still haven't used. The note only had one sentence. There are some truths people don't tell until they think the first ones are buried. So no, the story didn't end when the town stopped believing my parents. That was just the day their voices got weaker than mine. Some doors are still locked. Some names still haven't been said out loud. And somewhere behind all the fraud, the lies, and the Canaanite humiliation, there is still one question I haven't answered. Did my parents destroy me because I was the disappointment? Or did they call me that because, deep down, they knew I was the one person in the family they could never fully control? Because if it's the second one, then what happened to them wasn't revenge. It was exposure, and exposure is only the beginning. If you want, I can turn this into a more viral YouTube format with a stronger retention-based first 30 seconds, more cliffhanger sentence breaks, and a cleaner part 2 handoff for AI voiceover.